Welcome to an introduction to educational research. The purpose of this video is to, one, introduce you to the 3 research course sequences required for your master's degree. 2, to present the college's performance expectations for you as a candidate seeking a master's degree. 3, discuss the course description and objectives of the first course in this research sequence, which is this course, EDU 710. 4, to introduce you to the textbook and other suggested resources. And by the way, in speaking of the textbook, here is the textbook. It's Action Research, Improving Schools and Empowering Educators. It's the 6th edition. It's by Mertler, Greg A. Mertler. And there is the ISBN number if you were considering ordering it. Now, this is the 6th edition. If you can't get the 6th edition, the 5th edition will work fine also. I went on to Amazon yesterday, and they are selling the textbook for $70, actually $69.53. And they only had the 5th edition, which would be okay. And if you were to purchase it from Amazon, you could get a used copy, which would be cheaper, or an e-book, which an electronic book, which is even cheaper. I also went on to the Barnes & Noble website, and they were selling it for $50.49, and they were selling the 6th edition. Another possibility is you might check in our library, in the university library. They may have 1 or 2 copies, but of course that you'll only be able to borrow it for a limited amount of time. But this is the textbook, and we will be using it in the course. So the quicker you can get it, the better off you are. So it's Action Research, Improving Schools and Empowering Educators, and it's the 6th edition by Mertler. Okay, so now the 5th reason or objective in the course is to present the concepts of a thesis, a field project, an action research project, and other alternative culminating products, and the distinction between them. A 6th purpose is to introduce the concept of developing a logic chain and working from a big picture idea and funneling it down into a very specific idea or area of inquiry. And finally, to offer some tips or ideas as to how to successfully complete this course without being totally stressed out and pulling your hair out. Now, the Master's Thesis Field Project Handbook should have already been emailed to you. In fact, if it has not, please email me and I'll get it to you immediately. If it has, and if you have printed a copy of it, it would be a good idea to have it handy as we go through this video. If need be, put the video on pause and you can go get your copy and then come back and turn the video back on again. If you don't have access to the handbook right now, that's okay. You'll still, this video will still be very readable and understandable without the handbook right now. Okay, let's take a look then here at the Master's Degree Research Course Sequence and Course Products. So your master's degree course sequence consists of a series of 3 research courses. The first course, which is this course, EDU 710, Introduction to Research for Educators. The initial course provides an overview of qualitative and quantitative research methods that are commonly used in the area of education and related social science fields. You'll learn how to read and to evaluate research studies, how to analyze the data, and how to design and actually write a research proposal. The culminating product of this course will be completion of a research thesis or field project proposal that will serve as your chapter 1 of your master's field project or thesis. And this idea will be discussed later on in the video. I want to say something about the word proposal. When you finish your 3 research class sequence, you will actually have a thesis, which will consist of chapters 1 through 4, or you'll have a field project will consist of chapters 1 through 4. So you'll have a completed thesis or field project. In this course, you are writing a research proposal, which will serve as your chapter 1 for now. Now, when I was doing my doctoral work, and I had completed all my coursework, and it became time for me to do my dissertation, I had my topic in mind, and I had done a lot of preliminary research. And so I had to, then what you have to do is you have to write a research proposal. And you have to present this proposal to your committee. Now, you won't have to present to a committee, but I had to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm proposing to do. Here's the background and need, why I want to do this and the importance of doing this. This is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to collect my data. When I do collect my data, this is how I'll analyze it, and so on. So you're writing a proposal. So you won't actually be conducting any research right now or doing a field project, but you will be talking about what you propose to do. Okay, now the second course in the sequence that you'll take is EDU 716, Reading and Writing Educational Literature, or it's referred to as the Review of the Literature course. And this course immerses you in reading and analyzing the current theoretical and empirical literature on an educational topic connected to your specific area of inquiry. Students are expected to define their topic and write a literature review in anticipation of their final master's field project or thesis. And this would be your chapter 2. This course incorporates writing instruction and practice and support for students who are undertaking graduate study in order to acquire the conventions of academic writing, which is a little different than just regular writing. In academic writing expected of master's level scholarship. And again, the culminating project in this course is the completion of chapter 2 of your field project or thesis, which would be the review of the literature. Now, the third and final course in the master's degree research sequence is your master's thesis or field project seminar. And this course provides support and direction during the development and completion of your culminating product requirement for the Master of Arts degree. And you will then complete your chapters 3 and 4 of your master's thesis or field project proposal. The requirement may be fulfilled either through a research study or a thesis or an applied project. And we'll talk about this distinction between thesis and field project a little bit later on in this video. Upon successfully completing the third course, you will have produced a master's thesis or a master's field project consisting of chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so those are the 3 research courses you will take for your master's degree. Next, we'll take a look at the competencies you are expected to demonstrate during these 3 courses, the 3-course sequence. And the Graduate Studies program is committed to the academic preparation of professionals like yourself for leadership roles throughout the pre-K to 14th grade educational system. And to that end, the program of instruction is designed to move you from being a scholar to an action researcher, and then eventually to an instructional leader. Now, your culminating product, your thesis or your field project, will require you to demonstrate applications of the theories, the pedagogy, the insights and skills acquired in your program of study. Whether you're in the educational technology track or urban education or special education, whatever track you're in. Also, it will require you to examine current issues, trends, and the pedagogy and research in education and in your area. It'll require you to explore the literature surrounding your master's study emphasis with regard to effective, appropriate, or innovative practices in teaching and learning. It may require you to use an action research to develop a final product, workshop, thesis, or in-depth literature review. And it will sort of ask you to contribute to solving an educational dilemma within your local school, your local district, or your community or state by demonstrating Thoreau's commitment to supporting local school districts, the needs of the school districts and at-risk youth, examining the needs of school districts that face challenges or achievement gaps, inadequate resources, poverty, English language learners, and diverse cultures, and focusing upon effective pedagogies drawn from real-world context and relating to teaching in multicultural school systems. So that's the overall program expectations. Now, the expectations for this course, this particular one course, the Introduction to Educational Research for Educators, will provide, the course is designed to provide an overview of the qualitative, quantitative, single case or single subject, and action research methods commonly used in the areas of education and the related social sciences. And the course is designed to help you critically read, evaluate, and design educational research. Now, objective 1, you're asked to demonstrate an understanding of the basic principles of the scientific inquiry as they relate to educational research. This objective will require you to become fluent in the specific vocabulary of research and the different functions and types of educational research. And you will be presented with videos that will go over all of these. Objective number 2, to demonstrate the ability to locate peer-reviewed journal articles, books, and documents on a specific topic. Now, I want to say a word about peer-reviewed resources. If you can, it is always best to use peer-reviewed resources, if you're not familiar with what that means. When I submitted an article to the Journal of Special Educational Technology, a piece of research that I had done, and when I submitted it for publication, I had to send 3 or 4 copies of the article to the Journal of Special Education Technology. Now, what the editors do then is they take the 3 or 4 articles that I have sent them, and they send them out to experts in the field to read my piece of research and to recommend that it either be published or to recommend that it be published with certain qualifications or that it not be published at all. But when the editors send out my article to the experts, my name is not on it and the institution that I was at is not on it. So there's no way to know who is submitting the article. So the experts are reading the article blind, so it's a peer review. And that creates a much more scholarly review. And so anytime that you are looking for literature and research resources, always try and locate peer-reviewed articles. Okay. The other thing is the university library has a wonderful, wonderful database. I mean, there's just a gazillion articles and journals and books on it. Since you're just starting out, it would really benefit if you became fluent in using the library database system. It'll save you tons and tons of time down the road. Trust me on this, is really important. If you devote an hour or 2 at the library with one of the librarians showing you how to use that database system, and you can access it from your own home and things like that, it'll save you tons and tons of time down the road. Okay, objective number 3. Demonstrate an understanding of the strengths and limitations of different research methodologies. You'll have an opportunity to demonstrate your understanding through responses to assigned readings, the assigned required readings. You'll be asked to respond to that, by your quality of your written assignments, and by your responses to review questions. So you'll have plenty of opportunity to demonstrate your understanding of the strengths and limitations of the different research methodologies. Now, objective number 4, be able to appropriately cite and reference journal articles, internet resources, books, etc., using the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, the 6th edition. Now, let me show you this manual. Okay, this is the publication manual. If there is one other resource other than the textbook that you would buy, I would strongly suggest that you buy the publication manual for the American Psychological Association. It outlines exactly what you need to do in writing, style of writing, how to appropriately cite different references and things like that. So this screen depicts 3 graphics from the internet. As of September 2019, this information that you see here was correct. And I'm assuming it's still correct today. However, we all know things can change quite rapidly on the internet. So, number 1, the red box with the number 1, which is in the top left screen, is a graphic of the actual website of the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, and you can see right above the red box, it has the APA online website URL, which is www.apastyle.org. So that's a resource you can look there. The number 2, which is in the top right part of the screen, is a graphic of the Barnes & Noble website. And as you can see, Barnes & Noble was selling the publication manual for $9.92. This was as of September. So I'm assuming that it still is. That's a real bargain. And number 3, which is at the bottom of your screen, is a URL which is underlined in red. And this website offers a free online version of the manual. So you can actually get the manual for free. And again, it would probably be one of the more important tools that you would have through your 3 research courses. It would be very, very helpful. Okay, now let's go to objective number 6, which is to complete chapter 1 of your master's thesis field project or field project in the form of a research proposal. So those are the objectives for this course. Now we're going to take a look at what constitutes an actual thesis or a field project or an action research project or some alternative projects. So the purpose of this information on this screen is to try and define what a thesis, a field project, and action research study are, what they are, and to point out the similarities and differences. Let's start with the thesis. Simply put, a thesis is a scientific study, and it uses scientific inquiry to answer a research question and includes a systematic methodology for examining a problem. And usually the statement of the thesis or the statement of the problem is expressed in your chapter 1 under the heading of statement of the problem. Let's take a look at an example. Let's assume you are in the special education master's degree program. And let's assume you're a special education, special day class teacher of 1st and 2nd grades. And you have a student in your first period math class who constantly calls out during class, frequently engages in really disruptive behavior and talking and disturbing the class and interrupting the lesson. You decide you'd like to reduce the number of the student's disruptive behaviors. So you have now identified a problem, reducing inappropriate behavior on the part of the student. Using the university databases, you begin to read up on behavior reduction strategies, and you become interested in one of the several differential reinforcement strategies that's called differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. Now, that's a very fancy sounding name for a very simple concept. Basically, the strategy consists of reinforcing the student when they are engaging in behavior that is incompatible with the target behavior, which is calling out. In other words, you would reinforce when the student is not calling out in class and when the student is acting appropriately, and you would withhold reinforcement when the student is engaged in the behavior of calling out. You decide to examine the effectiveness of this strategy with this particular student. If it proves successful, it will help the student to remain on task, and it'll make your classroom a lot nicer and your lessons a lot more understandable to other students. And it might also become an additional part of your behavior management toolbox. So to start with, for the first 5 days, you have your classroom aide collect baseline data during this first period math class on the frequency or number of times that the student calls out. After 5 days, the results were the first day the student called out 10 times, the second day 12 times, the third day 11 times, the fourth day 11 times, and the fifth day 12 times. So it looks something like the graph that you see there. You see that the number of callouts is fairly stable. First day was 10, then 12, then 11, then 11, then 12. And that's a total of 56 callouts for the week for those 5 days, which would be an average of 11.2 callouts per class session, which we will round it to 11 callouts per class session. Well, since the data is fairly stable, you make an assumption that the behavior has reached its natural level in the environment. And if there is no intervention, if you don't do anything, if you take no action, that the number of callouts is going to remain around 11 every class period. So you decide to take action. So for the next week, you introduce this differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior strategy. When the student is not engaging in calling out behaviors and is engaged in appropriate classroom behaviors, you make eye contact with the student, you smile, you verbally reinforce the student. Excellent job in staying on task, really fine work, etc., stuff like that. If the student is engaged in inappropriate classroom behavior, you ignore the student or you withhold reinforcement. Actually, that's called extinction, but you would ignore the student. And your classroom aide continues to track the frequency of callouts for each class session using the DRI, differential reinforcement incompatible behavior strategy. At the end of the week, the data is as follows. The first day, there were 11 callouts. Second day, 5 callouts. Third day, 4 callouts. Fourth day, 7 callouts. Fifth day, 5 callouts. So that's a total of 31 callouts for the week and a rounded average of 6 callouts per class session. So the data would look like this now. So you've intervened, which would be the B, and you see that the data has gone down. Now, since the data has moved in a therapeutic direction, the callouts have gone down, it appears that the differential reinforcement of the incompatible behavior strategy is working. But to make sure, you decide to go back to the baseline condition and withdraw the reinforcement strategy. So for the next week, your aide again tracks the frequency of callouts. The results are, first day there's 7, next day there's 12, then 10, then 12, then 11. So there'll be a total callouts for the week are 52 with an average of 10.2 callouts rounded to 10 callouts per session. And so the data would look like this. So the data has moved in a contra-therapeutic direction now. It went back up and you're headed back to where you started. So finally, you go back to the intervention condition where you reintroduce the differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. Your aide collects the data for the next 6 days, and the results are first day 10, then 8, then 6, then 4, then 4, then 5, for a total of 37 callouts over the 6 days, yielding an average of 6.1, or rounded to 6 callouts per day. And so the data would look like this in the graph. And the data has again moved in a therapeutic direction. You review now what's taken place. You took baseline data and your student was calling out on an average of 11 times per class period. You introduced the differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, and callouts dropped to 6 per class session. You withdrew the differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, and daily callouts went back up to 10 per class session. And finally, you reintroduced the differential reinforcement intervention, and callouts went down to 6 per class session. So you conclude that the differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior intervention was successful because the student callouts decreased when differential reinforcement was in place, and when it wasn't in place, these behavior, the callouts increased again. So you have just completed a scientific study. You've identified a problem. You searched the literature for some behavior reduction strategies to deal with the problem and decided that differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior might work. You developed a plan, you implemented the plan, you collected the data, and you analyzed the data. You then reported your results to your peers at, let's say, a staff meeting or something. This would be an excellent example of a thesis. Okay, now let's take a look at, here are some actual theses that students have done. This is the effects of social story strategies on social skills of high school students with intellectual disabilities. So this student did a scientific study looking at the effects of social story strategies on social skills of high school students with intellectual disabilities. And this is a poster, or culminating poster of the results. Here is another example of a thesis: the effects of digital tools on developing literacy skills in middle school students and their impact on acquiring language arts Common Core standards. Another thesis: an assessment of community attitudes and behavior to inclusion of youth with disabilities in youth sports recreational activities. So this was obviously, this student did a survey, which was very legitimate for a thesis. Here's another thesis: can students differentiate their own instruction? And this, I knew this student, I supervised this student's thesis. Did a scientific study on whether students can differentiate their instruction. Okay, those are 4 examples of some theses that students have done. Now let's take a look at a field project. Now a field project produces a product to address or solve an educational problem, dilemma, or a need. The project has objectives and outcomes, and it's usually put into what's called an action research cycle, which we will discuss in just a minute. Now, some examples of websites that students have done on a topic are in-service training modules, parent awareness training modules, computer software to address educational issues, development of websites, all different kinds of products. So let's take a look at some examples of projects that students have done. Here is a project building awareness of the connection between good nutrition and student success, a workshop for preschool families. So this student developed a workshop for preschool families having to do with good nutrition. Here's a project on transformative teacher leadership, and I think this was an in-service training project that the student had done. Bring your own device. This was a policy making and implementation project in a school for students to be able to bring their own devices. Strategies for successful transition to college for students with Asperger's syndrome. And I think this was a pamphlet that the student had developed. So those are some examples of projects, field projects. Now, let's look at this action research project. Action research is systematic inquiry conducted by teachers or administrators or counselors, people working in the schools to improve their own specific educational practice. So this is a piece of research that can take place in classrooms, schools, or in districts. And it has a 4-step cycle, and when you read chapter 1 in the textbook, it will introduce you to this cycle in great detail. So here I'll just very briefly go over it. It's identifying an area or focus of concern, collecting data on that area, on the procedures, analyzing and interpreting the data, and then developing a plan of attack. But you will get that in great detail actually in chapters 1 and 2 of your textbook. So when the time comes that they're assigned, you will be very well versed in action research. Now, there are some possibilities for alternative projects. One could opt to do an extended literature review, which is a very interesting project. However, I must warn you, this is a really, really intense process. You would just have to examine almost all of the literature in your area and then condense it all into yeah, it's heavy scholarship, but I don't mean to discourage you. It's certainly one. Another one is you could submit a journal article for publication, which is really great, but the problem is, not the problem, but if you're going to submit an article for publication, then you have already had to have done the research, and if you've already done the research, that could be your project or your product. Finally, you can develop and submit a grant proposal, and we have guidelines for that also. And there are many other alternatives that you might come up with, which might be very appropriate. You need to just discuss those with your instructor. So this is a thesis or a field project or a action research project or some alternative projects that you can do for your culminating project. This website right at the top up in the yellow box, that long URL with HTTPS and so on. If you were to type that into your search engine in your computer, it would take you to about 25 or 30 student research theses or field projects that have already been done. So you can get a really, really good idea of all of the different areas that students have looked at. All right, so let's move on here. Okay, let's assume you've decided on a general area of inquiry for your thesis or your field project. And you've gone to the databases, the university databases, and you've dug into the relevant research literature concerning your area, and you've done some preliminary reading on the topic. And you've settled on an overall topic that you would like to address. Now, the next step is to whittle down your overarching idea, your big idea, to a manageable question or topic or area of inquiry. And so you need to develop an expository argument, which starts out with the very big picture and logically funnels down to a manageable area of inquiry. In this case, it would be a field project, or if it's a research question, you would funnel down to a specific research question or a hypothesis. Let me use my doctoral dissertation as an example. My doctorate degree was in special education, and the title of my dissertation was The Development of a Direct Observational Data Collection System to Collect Data in an Unobtrusive Manner. So I actually developed a product. So I did a field project because I developed a product. A piece of so I developed a piece of computer software and a remote control device about the size of a credit card for data collection. And so my dissertation was really, again, a field project. Now, let's take a look at how I set up my argument, starting out with the big picture. So I started out with the Individuals with Disability Education Act. So a signature component of IDEA is that each student has an IEP which contains broad goals and specific objectives to reach these goals. However, no guidelines are offered in the law to measure or monitor progress towards these goals. And I have a citation here. And generally, when you go through the steps of your logic chain, all of the major steps should be supported by existing research. So I started out with the big idea, the idea of IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and specifically the IEP, and specifically the broad goals and specific objectives, and that they are not monitored or measured. There's nothing in the law that talks about monitoring or measuring them. So then I pointed out that research indicates that whenever goals and objectives are monitored and measured, students in special education, their performance increases a great deal. And there you see the citations there to support that also. So then I went down, so since there are no guidelines for monitoring and measuring, and since monitoring and measuring really increases student performance, then I went to teachers generally do not collect direct observational data on performance because they lack knowledge. It's really too time consuming. Teachers have enough to do. And most of the time they don't see the need for it. And again, there are the appropriate citations. So then I moved to that there are recent developments in technology that can assist teachers and alleviate some of the teacher problems in the collection and analysis of direct observational data. And again, the citations. And then I went down to the present technology, although it is extremely helpful for teachers, it leaves the teacher or the user chained to the keyboard because the teacher has to be at the keyboard entering the data as they are observing and collecting the data. And then finally down to my actual research topic or question. Therefore, there is a need for the development of a remote controlled direct observational data collection system. And so that's what I did. I wrote software and I have this little data collection thing. The teacher can walk around the classroom and still teach and be able to collect data. Okay, so my dissertation is not important. The software is not important. What is important is this idea of building a logic chain from a big picture down to your specific area of inquiry or your research question or your research hypothesis, and that each of the major steps in the way down are supported by existing research. And that's something you will need to demonstrate when you develop your Chapter 1 research proposal. All right, moving on. Now, on this screen are the components of your Chapter 1 for your master's thesis or field project. And in going over the material, you'd find it very helpful if you had your master's thesis field project handbook in front of you. If you have it printed out, and you can get your hands on the copy, put the video on pause and go and get it. And have it up by your side as we're going through this. And if you don't have it printed out, don't worry about it. You'll still be able to get through the material, but it would be helpful if you did have it. Okay, now, the components of your master's thesis or field project, whether you're doing a field project or a thesis, both will have this first part. You'll have a title page with no page number, and look at page 25 in your master's thesis field project handbook, and that's exactly what your title page looks like. You just copy it. So open up a Word document, copy it, and you've got that already done. Second, you'll have a signature page, which will have no page number either. And if you look at page 26 in the thesis and field project handbook, that's exactly what your signature page looks like. Next, you'll have an author's release permission to use form, which will have no page number. And that's on page 27 in your field project, thesis field project handbook. So you just copy that exactly as it is. Next, you'll have an abstract that has no page number. Next, you'll have an acknowledgments page, and that's optional. You do not have to have an acknowledgments page if you don't want to. Next, you'll have a table of contents that will include all of the contents of your Chapter 1, either field project proposal or research thesis proposal. And that would include appendices if there are any. Next, you'll have a list of tables, if in fact your data will be displayed in tables. And next, you'll have a list of figures, if in fact there will be any figures that you may have. So actually, when you're done with this video, you could put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can do 8 pages of your research proposal, thesis, or field project in place right now. You can open up a Word document and just go copy the first, all those title page, signature page, author page, then put a blank page with abstract, a blank page with acknowledgments and table of content and so on. And you've got 8 pages already done. Now, if you're doing a thesis, you'll want to look at pages 6 to 8 in your handbook, and that'll outline exactly the components that you should have. There'll be an introduction to the problem, and you'll establish a background and a need. There'll be a theoretical underpinning, and all of this is explained in your handbook. Next, you'll have a statement of the problem and your logic chain. Then you'll have, if you're doing a thesis, you'll have a research question or hypothesis. Then you'll have a methodology section and who's going to participate in your thesis, what your subjects are, how will data be collected. When you do actually collect data, how are you going to propose to analyze your data? What do you think your expected results will be? What will be your limitations? You'll define any esoteric terms. You don't have to define terms that are understandable to everyone who's involved in education, but any esoteric terms if there are any. Then you'll have a summary. Then you'll have your reference section, which will be in the American Psychological Association format. And if appropriate, you'll have appendices. So if you're doing a thesis, your Chapter 1 research proposal will include all of those. Now, if you're doing a project, your Chapter 1 research proposal will include everything that is in the middle field, and you will find on pages 8 and 9 in your master's thesis field project handbook, it'll outline exactly what you need. So you will, like if you were doing a thesis, you will have the same thing, introduction to the problem, you'll have a background and need, you'll have a theoretical underpinning, you'll have the statement of the problem and the need and a logic chain. But unlike a thesis, you will not have a research question or hypothesis. You will have a section on the purpose of the field project where you outline the purpose and the format. And then you will have another section that has the project objectives and how each of your objectives, how they will be evaluated. Then you will discuss your expected outcomes and definition of terms, a summary, references in applied American Psychological Association format, and then appendices if appropriate. If you are going to do an action research project, then your textbook, chapters 1, 2, and 3 will outline exactly what you should include. And you will have an introduction to your problem, and like in the thesis and the field project, you'll have background and need, your theoretical underpinning, statement of the problem and need, your logic chain, your review of relevant literature, the purpose of the action research, and then a plan, which will have your methodology, your participants and your audience, and other relevant parts of the plan. You'll have results and reflections on your results, limitations of the project, what the takeaways may be from the project, conclusions, definition of terms, summary, references in American Psychological Association format, and appendices, if in fact they are appropriate. So those are the components of either a thesis, a field project, or an action research project. And again, they are outlined very specifically in your master's thesis field project handbook and chapters 1, 2, and 3 of your textbook. Okay, now this says don't panic. Some points to consider, and this is important. So a concern you may have is, how is it going to be possible to cover the course content and to develop a research field project proposal in the span of one semester? So I want you to consider that the most important task is going through the research process and not developing a beautifully formulated research proposal. This is not the time to save the world. When you do your doctorate work, that's the time. So this course will present you with an action research model. Learning the process of designing and conducting the action research is much, much more important than the final product you produce. Again, I refer you to chapters 1 and 2 of your textbook. The action research process generally consists of the 4 steps listed below, which we've already talked about, so I'm not going to read them. If you can become familiar in designing and implementing an action research project, you will have met the goal of the course, and you'll be prepared to carry this process into your teaching career. So sit back, relax, take a deep breath, go to a happy place, and start to give some thought to some ideas of inquiry you might like to examine. Another point I'd like you to consider, as you begin to examine the research literature pertaining to your area of inquiry, you most likely will end up with a series of research articles that you culled from various sources. You'll most likely read these articles and begin to highlight various parts that appear informative and useful. This is an excellent strategy as far as it goes. However, when it comes time to write your Chapter 1 proposal, and your introduction section, and your background and needs section, and your rationale section, you may find yourself getting lost in the process. I recall doing my doctoral dissertation, I had maybe a stack of 50 research articles on my desk and all over the apartment, and books all over, and it was just crazy. A strategy that has been very useful for me is, as I'm reading each article, to underline significant points or ideas with different colored markers depending on where you might fit it in your proposal. As an example, suppose you're interested in doing a field project that deals with AIDS awareness. On your screen is an excerpt from a research article titled "Prompting Bar Patrons with Signs to Take Free Condoms." And this is an actual article that you're going to read during this course. As you're reading, you realize that there is part of this article that would fit nicely into the introduction section of your research proposal, where you are discussing the big picture. So you highlight it in red. So in the article, you've highlighted that part. And then as you read further, you come across a passage that might fit well into your background and needs section. So you highlight that in green. Again, you continue to read the same article and you encounter information that will go great in your rationale section, so you highlight that in blue. So what you wind up with at the end is a series of articles that you have where information is color-coded into useful categories that match the sections of your proposal you'll be writing. And when it comes time to write your introduction section, you go to all of those articles, you go to all of your resources, and you locate all the items underlined in red. And when you go to your background and need, you locate the green items and so on. And so you get the idea. This has been a very, very helpful organizational strategy for me. So give it a try. And here's a final point. One of the major things in successfully completing this course and in completing your research proposal, the major skill is time management. You need a plan. You need a plan. So what I've done here, and this is what I did with my dissertation also, I task analyzed everything that needed to be done to complete my dissertation. And actually, I had a task analysis on the wall of my apartment, and I used sticky notes. So these little boxes, let's say, represent sticky notes. So you'll see I did a task analysis. So you need a title page, you need a signature page, you need an author's release page, you need an abstract, acknowledgments, table of contents, list of tables, list of figures. You need to gather resources. Then you need to start to write your introduction to the problem, the statement in need, problem background, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so let's say, well, okay, all of these, I can set up right away. So in a day, I can do that. Now, let's say I'm going to plan 4 or 5 days to collect resources and to read. And then I'm going to start to write. And so I'm going to put my introduction is going to take 2 days, and my statement of my need is going to, and so on. And so you come up with a plan, some kind of a plan of attack, so that you can have some control over the process and it does not get out of hand. And by the way, let me also address this. This is an online course, and it becomes very easy to let this kind of a course go and to get way, way, way behind. So try and stay right on top of this, because it's a pretty, if your time management skills are in place, this course will go very smoothly for you. Okay, so think in terms of developing a plan. All right, now finally, I'm going to ask you to respond, to set up a Microsoft Word document. By the way, please send me all of your assignments in the form of a Microsoft Word document that has, as a file name, it has your name, /, and in this case, just student data. But if it were assignment number 1, you would put assignment number 1. If it were assignment number 2, assignment number 2, in Word document format. So please open up a Word document and respond to these prompts. Your name, your cell phone, this is supposed to be, an other phone, your landline, if you'd like to share that. What's the best time to call you? Your Turo email address, any alternative email address you would like to use other than Turo. I don't use the Turo account, so if you're going to email me, you need to email me at this address. When you email me your assignments, email to happyj1939@yahoo.com. What program are you enrolled in? Are you in Innovative Learning, Special Education, or whatever the other ones are? If you are teaching, please describe your teaching situation, where you teach, what you teach, your grade level, the kind of students you teach. Where did you do your undergraduate work? What was your major? What are some special qualities about you that you might be willing to share? And if you are working in a school district, when is your spring break? Well, okay, so that's about it. So again, a reminder, please submit all of your assignments in Microsoft Word. My old computer doesn't handle Google Docs or any of the, and PDFs don't work either for me. So put it in Microsoft Word. The file name is your name / and then whatever the title of, if it's assignment 1, assignment 2. In this case, this would be student data. So please put this and respond to this and email me your responses. Welcome to the class. I think we'll have a good time. It's a lot of work, but we'll get through it just fine. So thank you for your attention. Very much appreciated, and we'll see you in the next video.